Over the last 5 to 6 years has been tremendous in the North Sea, and the effect on the islands has been so great that they just cannot comprehend what's actually happening.
Sullom Voe terminal is a transshipment terminal. It is not a refinery as such, although there are certain refinery processes involved in the eventual removal of the gas from the crude oil, but it is purely a transshipment terminal, and it is also the closest point of land to where the actual oil is coming from, i.e. the east of Shetland basins. Some exploration is going on the west of Shetland fields, and this terminal has been designed, if necessary, to accommodate a third pipeline. The peak of the workforce will be reached from the middle towards the end of 1978, and the figure will then be between 3,500 and 4,000 men. There are two major concerns from Northern Ireland at the moment. LJK joint venture, which is a consortium of 3 companies, employ quite a high proportion of that figure.
I come from Kerry.
Originally from Longstone, County Down, near Kilkeel.
Armagh. Come from Hilltown, County Down.
Hookstown.
I'm from Burtonport in County Donegal.
And Knockbreda builders also have a number of Irish people here.
At the moment we have, yes, 85 or so men. Of the 85 there would be 65 of them Ulster men. We've always had about 3/4 of the workforce Ulster men.
From Derry. Lisburn.
Park, County Derry. I left college, the sort of work was offered or able to do at home was kind of like what I would like to be doing when I'm retired. So I was given an opportunity of getting some more responsibility here.
I come here 2 years ago. I was going to do a 6-week trip here, and I liked it so well, and the money was good, and decided to stay, so I'm still here.
Well, the money's good out here, you wouldn't get the same at home. Not just scaling a nest egg here, possibly go to Middle East or Knockbreda at the end of this contract, maybe spend a couple of years there and then possibly go home.
Before Christmas I did 3 months, and this time I'll have 3 months by the time I go home for Easter.
It has only been recently that we have got involved with oil-related work. The first of our oil-related work, the first contract has been the Bray to Graven Road. We started it early in March 1977, and we are nearly completed. In this last 3 years, we have turned over £8 million worth of work in Shetland. Work at home is very, very scarce. We decided, because of the scarcity of work in Northern Ireland, to come out to Shetlands.
Oh, these are companies that are actually supplying all sorts of various things. I was up at Aberdeen to the offshore industry, which was a tremendous exhibition. And of course, they supply all sorts of things, from the drilling bits of used tools to the tough carpeting as well. We're in on the ground floor, and we're now recognised as one of the suppliers, and of course there is always other areas opening up in this field, and of course we're keeping a very close eye on the world market as well, and hoping that we will be in on other areas on the ground floor. This was recognised, I think, in 1974 when the Department of Commerce set up its own offshore oil branch group within the Department of Commerce. Then we'd only a couple of firms involved in this, but now I can assure you there's well over 60 firms involved, and of course this has its spin-off as well in the service and other industries too. In terms of money, what it meant in Northern Ireland was as much as about £35 million in 1976, and we're expecting this to be more in 1977. So it's quite a lucrative market to us, and thanks to the foresight of a lot of people, we were in at the very early stages, and of course this has saved us tremendously on employment as well.
The main consideration for these men, having worked very closely with the council in deciding where exactly they will be accommodated, it was decided that to put the 2 construction villages, Firth and Toft, as close to the terminal as possible. And because the terminal itself is located in a fairly remote part of Shetland, the facilities for these men in the two construction villages are at a very high level. For instance, they have cabaret shows 3 nights a week. They have a cinema which operates 3 nights a week. They have their own bars and sporting facilities which are at a very high level indeed. And because the men are working quite long hours and are also working 7 days a week, when they get back to the village, most of them do not feel the need to go out of the village. They've got all the facilities that they would probably require there.
We work, the usual day we work from 7, starting on the site, to the usual quitting time 7, but it could carry on maybe to 10, 11, according to what job you're at, you know, where concrete had to be finished.
There's about 50 men here, like myself, that's been away from Northern Ireland for about maybe 7 or 8 years, working through England where the money's on. Like.
It's a steady job, and there's good accommodation, and there's a fairly good crowd of men here.
The basic wage structure is the same per trade for the rest of the UK. The difference does come in with the fact that these men are working quite commonly 80 hours a week and sometimes a little more. So they are able to gross, on average, a lot of them, approximately £200 a week. They do not need to spend any of this money while on Shetland and in the villages, except on refreshments. All their food is provided free and their accommodation is free, together with all the other facilities on the camp.
The money is good. Well, it's according to the hours you work. There's ways there, maybe that top line, 3,500 a week. The tax out of that, it's not too bad.
We're all young married men that are over here for the money to take back home to build houses and all like that back in Northern Ireland.
Well, the money's good, yeah. Good money.
That's the way the job operates, that you've got to work 4 weeks.
They like it to a certain extent and because the money's there. And because there's so many blokes from around home, like, that's what takes them all over here. Like.
If you're working at home, you'll probably work 5 days or 5.5 days and you have a weekend off. And this makes up for being away from home, your week off. So.
I go home every 4 weeks, there for a week. Maybe more if I can pinch it. We used the Don Air charter down from Sunborough to Glasgow, and then we used sometimes Woodgate 5-seater or the Bailey flights from Glasgow, 5-seaters.
You miss a lot. You miss a lot of home life and the youngsters and all this business, you know.
Sometimes you do get lonely for them, you know.
Oh, you miss them certainly, aye.
I do miss my family, but I still have to work.
The whole lot amounts up to a fairly good job.
I think the men have an interest in their work. The productivity level on site is extremely high, despite what can be on occasions very difficult conditions. They are also, of course, earning very good money, and a lot of them are sending it home to their families. I think the motivation is there for them to continue to work at this level.
Ten years ago was the beginning of quite a good period for the islands. After the war, throughout the 1950s, there was mass unemployment in the islands. Opportunities were almost nil for anybody who wanted to stay on the islands. And that saw a period of quite mass emigration, and the decrease in population actually coincided with a healthier economy, less people in the islands, and the economy started to look up, based on fishing, based on knitwear, based on lots of little industries. So 10 years ago, 1967 to 1968, things were heading towards quite a healthy situation for the first time, probably in Shetland's history. When oil was first mentioned in the early 70s, People did have very specific attitudes towards oil at that time. There was the anti-oil, there was the pro-oil. Anti-oil, well, there was people who didn't want a strange outside industry. Industry is the key there. Coming into the islands, they thought it would wreck their conception of the way of life up here, for instance. There was even religious people that thought that no good would come of working out in the North Sea. The fishermen were very, very anxious about any industrial activity in the areas in which they fished. The people who were pro-oil, there was lots of people who remembered the 1950s and earlier, in which it was very, very difficult to get a job, and they welcomed more jobs on the islands. There was also the, I suppose, the entrepreneur fraternity who welcomed extra business coming into the islands. That was quite clear-cut in the early 70s, the antis and the pros.
I think in the early stages there was quite a potential for problems, not only environmental problems, but of a social nature. The fact that the terminal, by arrangement with the council, is in a fairly isolated spot, and the two construction villages are close by, away from the main centres of population on Shetland, such as Lerwick and Scalloway, has eased the situation considerably. There are, of course, still some problems to be solved. The whole infrastructure of the island is building up. More and more houses are being built, and more problems are being created. But they are very capably being handled by the council. The council have special powers in Shetland under the Zetland County Council Act of 1974, which was ratified by central government in London. And this enabled the council to, in liaison with the oil companies, to make sure that the terminal was suited, put in an area which was suited not only to the environment but to ease the social difficulties.
Does the council, in fact, the public representatives of the islanders, is it the council that decides what goes where?
Yes, there are a number of committees at the moment. The main one is the Sullom Voe Association, which is 50% industry people and 50% council people, and all matters of policy relating to the Sullom Voe oil terminal are ratified by that council, so that nothing gets built or nothing gets extended without going through the Sullom Voe Association.
So the oil men can't do what they like on Shetland?
No, they can't, nor would they particularly want to, of course. The area where the terminal is situated, as an example, is an area where, as far as wildlife is concerned, there's very little. There are a number of birds on Shetland which do not occur or appear anywhere else in the UK, but they're in other parts of the island away from the eventual location of the terminal.
What are the attendant risks of such a big project? Is there any, for example, any attendant risk of oil pollution?
There's always the risk. A lot of effort has been put into making that the minimal risk. The ports and harbours side of the Sullom Voe terminal is run by the council, which is something that there is no precedent for in the United Kingdom, i.e. a local authority running a ports and harbours division. Although the ultimate responsibility for pollution lies between the council and the oil industry, every step has been taken to safeguard that danger.
It changed when the Shetland Islands Council, well, it wasn't the Shetland Islands Council at that time, it was the Zetland County Council, decided with decided after a lot of anguishing that they would put up a bill in Parliament which would give the islands control, or some measure of control and financial benefit over the oil developments on Shetland territory. And the council itself and the people in the islands were split. There was those who were quite keen on the council having control, you know, the Shetlanders through the council having control over oil development. But there was also those who, while they were quite in favour of Shetland retaining what it had before, were very much against the council being involved with private enterprise or oil development. And there was also those who realised that they could make a bit of money out of the situation if they could deal directly with the oil companies. So the island split, and that coincided, I think, to a degree with the average ordinary person in the town beginning to lose interest in what was happening. They lost interest because they didn't really comprehend what was going on, the arguments one way or the other.
But despite that, Ian, benefits have clearly accrued to the Shetland people. And wasn't it really a good thing that it was decided in the beginning that the Shetland Council should have such a big say in developing and deciding what goes where?
Yes, that's true. But the problem is that over the last couple of years, the Shetland Islands Council has to a degree lost the confidence of some of the people in the islands, and this stems from the Shetland Islands Council's attitude, or obvious attitude, outward attitude, towards the Scottish devolution debate. The Shetland Islands Council have taken a line that they're anti-devolution. They prefer to retain the links with London. Now, this is outward. It's not quite so within the council chamber. If you went along to a council meeting, it's more complex than that. But because of that attitude, because of the complexity, again, of the debate over devolution and what stands to take, I think a lot of people who were formerly very pro-council are now anti-council, or they're apathetic in a way to the council's attitude.
You paint a picture in of at least underlying resentment by the people here about the oil business. Can you point up for us the degree of that resentment?
Well, I think resentment is too strong a word. It's something less than resentment. I think the feeling of a vast amount of people would be if they could have got to a very prosperous situation in the islands, which was probably possible. I don't know. This is something for the economists to debate. Without oil, if they could have got to that situation without oil, it would have been better. But this, of course, is a debate. Only in the long term will that sort of debate be proven one way or the other.
The majority of Shetlanders have welcomed the oil people to Shetland. Obviously, there are always some people who do not wish us to be here. But by and large, I think that as the years have gone by and they have noticed the reasonably minimal disturbance to life on Shetland, as minimal as we can possibly make it, satisfied most of them.
Take people like your parents who've lived all their lives in Shetland. What do they think about what's happened?
As regards oil in the islands, that one specific subject, it completely passed them by. They took a trip up to see the oil developments at Sullom Voe, and they sort of looked at it and said, wow, that's immense, that's spectacular. And then they drove on, and that was it. It was too big for them to comprehend in relation to the Shetland that they knew. It wasn't the Shetland they knew.
A lot of Shetlanders do not realise the size of the terminal itself. One of the main reasons for this is that the terminal is not very noticeable until you're right up to it. And we do in fact take a considerable number of Shetlanders around the terminal, not only the council people and the council executives, but a lot of the local community have had visits to the terminal arranged by my office, and although these are mostly business people and people who have some interest directly in the terminal, they do spread the word around, and I think most people are generally aware of what is going on up at Calbackness. the terminal itself has an ultimate design capacity of 3 million barrels a day. At the moment, the projected figure is 1.39 million barrels per day. And this figure is arrived at by the pipeline operators for the Ninian and Brent pipeline systems, informing us every May as to what the projected throughput of oil into the Sullom Voe terminal will be 4 years from now. And the current projection is a flow rate of 1.39 million barrels a day. But the terminal, as I said earlier, has the scope to increase, assuming that there are more large viable fields, either on the east side or the west side of Shetland, for which a third pipeline is justified. So putting a time or date on it is rather difficult, but we're certainly well into the next century.
I think the real benefits will only be proven in the long term, 30 or 40 years' time.
I would expect that a lot of things will accrue to Northern Ireland as the oil flows in.